I would say my first recollection of like what racism was when I was 5 years old at elementary school. A fifth grader who is white came up to me and my best friend at the time and called us the N-word. And we were only 5. I didn't even know what it was until my best friend told me to tell my mom because she was the principal at the school. And so at home, when I repeated the word back to my mom, she was so lost because she was like, "Why are you hearing this and you're just 5?" And I was like, "I don't know."
After my election, there was talk of a post-racial America. And such a vision, however well intended, was never realistic. Race remains a potent and often divisive force in our society.
My name is Haileigh Irving. I'm currently a student at Valencia College. My major is psychology, and I also work at an elementary school as a teaching assistant. I think it's important for them to learn about African American life in America because the reality is we make up 13% of the population, and you have to learn how to get along with everyone and learn about their culture and history in order to be tolerable of them.
Now, I've lived long enough to know that race relations are better than they were 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, no matter what some folks say.
It might not have been like the deep-rooted Southern racism that we saw like in the 1800s or like in the mid-1900s, but it's definitely still alive today, just in very different forms. Today, it's like kind of discreet. Like no one is obviously like gonna come up to you now in today's racial climate and call you like the N-word or say like you need to die and some stuff like that. But definitely microaggressions is a form of racism. Like people always make assumptions towards Black people and try to play it off as like a joke or like ignorance even though they know better. I think there's a difference between like stereotypes and like being actually microaggressive and then jokes. I would say this, I was like, if the Black person is making a joke about their own race, then it's a joke, it's okay. But usually, from my experience, like when non-Blacks make jokes and stereotypes, they secretly mean it, or it's just like, it's completely written off the wrong way, and then it's thrown like, oh, by the way, bro, I said it as a joke, even though they just said something horrible, like, oh yeah, Black people don't have fathers, like, that's not a joke. I would definitely say it's a learned behavior. You know, if you observe, I'm a psych major, when you observe children and how they interact with kids and whether they do parallel play or like face-to-face play where you interact with everyone, that's not a common behavior, racism. It's taught. I definitely think people are taught it from their parents, like what you're told at home and what you consume that your parents watch. Like if your parents are always watching like incriminating media of Black people, you're gonna eventually internalize that too because you can't control what you watch. And then when you go to school, if you go to a climate where people's parents are similar to your parents, and then you interact with other kids, you start actually believing what you're saying. And then you pair that off with like living in a state like, I don't know, Minnesota, where like the population of Black people is 1%, so you have no idea if what you're learning about Black people is true or not. There's the recipe for disaster. That's how racism still lives through on today. I remember the earliest I can remember having this conversation was probably when I was in elementary school, like 3rd grade. One of the major field trips, it was either 3rd grade or 4th grade, was we went to St. Augustine. That's something you usually do if you're in Florida. And I remember my mom, she was like talking to James and I. James is my twin brother. He was like, you need to make sure that you don't act a fool, you don't go touching anything, you stay with the chaperones and you do what you're supposed to do because you're Black. In St. Augustine, there's not a lot of Black people in St. Augustine, and they will not hesitate, to cause a scene or do whatever. Even in high school, you remember how before each game, if it was like a long period of time, we would hang out and like go out to eat or go to the store and chill. She was like, Haileigh, James, y'all don't have the luxury to, to go to CVS and live your life like it's Ferris Bueller and, like just screw around in the stores. You have to be careful, because what they'll see is they'll see a black person making a mess and acting a fool in the store, and they're going to put two and two together and draw their own conclusions. And that's like an example of one of the many conversations black people, not just me, but other black people like probably hear growing up.
The African American community is looking at this issue through a set of experiences and a history that doesn't go away. There are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very, very few African American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off. That happens often.
Some people live with, expressions like rose-tinted glasses on, thinking like the world is sweet, and oh, well, even if I'm black, if I'm not doing anything wrong, surely no one can get upset at me, right? But then you've seen all the cases where it's like black people are, inconspicuously not doing anything wrong, and then they still get targeted and or killed. And so it's a conversation you need to have with your kids, just so they understand that life is not sweet out there. You could be doing 100% what you're supposed to be doing, but there's always that chance or instance of encountering, the wrong person that will set your day off wrong. You shouldn't be 8 years old trying to live your life and then hearing like, oh, by the way, be careful because, you might get shot because you're black and stuff like that. Like, what? Talking to some kids and like they would be completely like flabbergasted that we were having this conversation. It was like ironic and kind of funny to me, because it's like, I wish I didn't have to hear that. I wish, like that wasn't the norm. But, black parents have to do what they have to do to protect their their kids, because they know exactly how harsh and unforgiving the world can be.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Definitely like watch what your kids are consuming and then like educate them, and don't let things slide, and definitely like having like some introspection and like reflection within yourself and realizing, well, do I have any harmful thoughts towards black people in the community that I shouldn't have, and how can I do things to do better? Learn about like what actually happened to black people, because what you learn about what happened during slavery is just the tip of the iceberg.